Ken Weller with New Tech Inventors. As you can see, I'm down here at the print farm. Very quiet down here today. The main reason is because we have a lot of thunderstorms and we've had a couple of power interruptions today. So we're definitely not taking any chances trying to run printers down here. But it is a good day to go through and look at what is going on, and that's what I'm trying to do today, is to go through the print room here, look at all of the printers and try to get an idea of what kind of condition we're in, what we need to do in this room. We've been running pretty heavy in our expansion, the assembly room. We've been doing a lot of assembly. We've been trying to get products finished and ready to go and so forth. And at the same time, I've been doing a lot of design work on some of the new products. So with everything going on, things get a little bit out of whack and out of control, and I can't keep up with everything. So I'm down here today. It's quiet. The air conditioner's feeling really good. This room that's usually somewhere between 85 and 90 degrees is now down to a comfortable, let's see what we're showing on here. Yeah, comfortable 75.6 degrees. That feels really good for change. What I'm going to do is just, I'll let you kind of walk through with me, and I'll show you what I normally do on a day like this, and looking at these printers and seeing what we have to do. Okay. As you can see on this top row, we have our Anet ET4s up here with the regular textured stick-on build plates, and I always keep plenty of these styluses around. That's what we use for the touch screens. And it looks like up here, I think all of these printers are in pretty good shape. We got glass beds on these two. They're set up to print a specific part. So glass beds on two of them, and these other six have the regular textured stick-on build plate. And on the next row down, we have an ET4X here, the glass bed. We've got a magnetic sheet on this ET4. Glass bed here, glass bed here. As you can see, I keep these, there are tools laying around all over the place, because when you're running these printers, you have to cut filament. Sometimes you have to make an adjustment or something. We'll check these things, and if one of them is a little bit loose, we'll need a wrench to tighten it up, or if there's something that we have to adjust on the extruder up here, may need an Allen wrench for that. So I keep tools handy. This is one of our cameras here, and this is one I can move around and put wherever I want it. And of course, then we also have some on tripods here and over here that we can move. And if we have a particular print job that we're printing on one of these printers for the first time, or we're experimenting with a different nozzle or something, and we want to keep a close eye on it, I'll put one of those cameras on it. And more tools, a little bit of grease. I always like to keep these worm drives a little bit of grease on them. It's very important too, the tension on your belts. I always like to keep an eye on these belts. This one's probably needing to be tightened up a little bit. They will loosen up over time. I like to keep them adjusted. I like to check these things, see how they're rolling and everything, and see if we're having any issues. And going on down here, some more ET4Xs with glass beds on them. On the bottom row, we have more ET4s here, and then we have some these are ET4Xs. Then we have some more ET4 Pros. These little white pieces here, this is where when we're running a print job on it, we always put on here what we're running and the information pertaining to that job, the settings and temperatures and so forth, so that we'll know if there's a problem, what our settings were when we were running the job. These are the rest of these down here on the bottom are ET4 Pros, except for the very end, an ET4, and they all have glass beds. And underneath those, you can see I have these little bins. This is where I put the parts when they come off the printers. Like I've told you before, there are specific printers. This part, for example, always prints on this printer. And that's all this printer is set up for, is to print that one part. And this one over here is set up to print only this part. And it prints 2, 4, 6, about 8 of them at a time. And so I have specific printers that are set up, and I know I can put the filament in and say go, and it's going to print whatever quantity of those parts are. And the reason there are different quantities on here is because I try to set it up so that I have enough pieces on here that it will run a full 12 hours or 24 hours so that it will be finished the next day, and I don't have to come down here at odd hours. Everything will finish up. If I were to start everything tomorrow, I would want to either start in the morning or start in the evening, and then set them up to run about 24 hours so that by the next evening I could come down here and all of them would be finished, and I could take the parts off and restart them. And then over here, these are the Kingroons that we have recently added. We have 6 of the KP3S's and 2 brand new KP3s. Now the KP3 I've used for a long time. If you notice in some of the other videos, I have about 12 or 13, 14 of these up at the house. I have 4 of them in my office, and I have a KP3S in my office, and then I have about 8 or 9 of these KP3s up in the bonus room in the original print farm. And these KP3s were the original print farm for me, and they've done so well up there that I decided to set up some of them down here. And you can see I can get 8 of them in this very small area, where over here I can only get 4 of these Anets. Of course, I have a larger bed, but if you look at some of these print jobs, they will print on the Kingroon. I can print all of these parts. They don't use the full 220 by 220. They're 180 by 180, and that's plenty of space to print a lot of different parts. Matter of fact, I can print every part for the helping hand except for one on this printer. So I figured they would be a good addition. The only limitation is that on some of the larger parts, I may only be able to print one at a time on these. Anyway, that's what we've got going there. And then I have a lot of these magnetic spring steel PEI sheets, and I'm using some of these on the KP3s because they'll work with the magnetic base that's already on here. So it's real easy to use these, and they're these little 150 by 150. I bought a lot of these because they were really cheap compared to spring steel PEI sheets. I think I paid about maybe $11 or $12 a piece, or maybe less for these. So I bought a lot of them and I used them on the KP3s. And of course I have the larger ones that I use on the Anets. Set for the X2 Pro with the 0.6 millimeter nozzle, and it takes 5 hours and 52 minutes to print. But that's a lot better than the 12 hours that it was taking, a little bit over 12 hours with the 0.4 millimeter nozzle. So if I can get as good a part, and I believe I will be able to, because you can see this part is fairly flat and solid, and I think I'll be able to print it with the 0.6 millimeter nozzle, and I'll be able to print at a higher temperature so I can get good fusion between the layers and between the different lines as they lay down, and end up with a good strong part that is within tolerances. So that's what we're going to find out, and that's what one of the projects I have there, and that's one of the priorities for my time down here, because this will affect about 6 or 7 different Tronic-C printers, and I'm also going to be setting it up to print on the PEI sheets. That's why I'm hoping they'll be in here. They're supposed to be here tomorrow or the next day, and I'll be printing these parts in a particular color, all with the PEI sheet and with the 0.6 nozzle. So that's one of the projects I've got going. And if you look at that stack of boxes right there, that's all filament. It's all one color. It's that shade of blue, and it prints on these printers here and this one. These 7 printers print nothing but that part, but it's a lot of filament, but you go through it pretty quick. When you print in a little bit less than 24 hours, you'll go through 7 spools of filament. We'll keep ordering that as we need it. We do have one more Anet A8 PLUS in the box down here that needs to be assembled. It came with a broken glass bed, but I also have some 300 by 300 glass beds coming in, and I'll be using one of those. They're kind of like the one that's on the ender up there that has the textured surface on the glass, and I'm going to try that out on it and see how it does. And I also have some 300 by 300 magnetic PEI sheets coming in. We might try a couple of those out on the Anet A8 PLUS. I think I'd mentioned before we have our filament counter, and it's over on the bottom shelf on the other side, and we use the filament counter to spool off a specific amount of filament. When, for example, we're going to run the same job on all 4 of these printers at once using the same color filament, I'll open one spool of filament and I'll spool off the 30 meters that I need for the print job and put it on an empty spool for that printer, for that printer, for that printer, and then I'll take the remaining amount on the spool and put it on this printer and let them all print. However, with some of the parts that we print continuously, and these were spools. They have just a little bit left. They probably have about 30 meters of filament left on them. They were running a job on the Anet A8 PLUS, and the job used about, like this job, used about 300 meters of filament for one part. And so there's about 30 meters left on each spool. And so I have all these spools with about 30 or 40 meters of filament left on them. And I'll use them probably with the Kingroon, since they'll be printing some smaller jobs and won't use as much filament. And there'll be just enough left on here to use it up that way, printing some smaller jobs. I think some of you that were here in the beginning, if you kind of remember when I was in here scraping this floor before I painted it and everything, would you have ever imagined that we would have all of these printers in here set up and have this thing wired electrically, have our lighting in, and have everything running? A computer down here, our camera system, and you know, just it's kind of incredible sometimes. I sit here and look at it and figure, gosh, how in the world did we get all this done? But myself and a little bit of help recently from my student intern, who works, you know, a few hours a week, usually in the evenings. And other than that, a lot of sweat and everything coming out of this old boy here. But I feel like I've got a pretty good investment here. I've got a lot of capability. With all the new products I'm coming up with, we have the capability to do a fair amount. If we exceed this capacity here of over 60 printers in here, plus I've got about, I guess, about 20 printers up at the house. I've got some large format printers up there, as well as several Delta printers, the Kingroons that I mentioned, and various other printers, some dual head printers and so forth. So we've got a lot of capacity here, and we haven't reached capacity yet. I can just turn out so many parts in a short period of time. And that's one reason that we are doing some outside work. For a while, we were only printing parts for ourselves, New Tech Inventors, or for myself, New Tech Inventors. But now we're a little bit open-minded to printing parts for other people. It looks like there's a lot of demand for 3D printed products, and a lot of that demand is not just in the product, but is in the design of the product and so forth. With some of the stuff that we've done, we actually take a product and then we look at ways to improve it or enhance it or improve the efficiency of 3D printing that part. When you're designing parts for 3D printers, in my opinion, you want to do as much as you can to avoid support, mainly because when you design a part that requires a lot of support, you're using additional filament that's going to be thrown away. You also have additional time for removing that support. And with some of the nozzles, if you try to do support with a 0.6 or 0.8 millimeter nozzle at higher temperatures, you're going to find that the separation of the support from the part is not as easy as it is if you're printing at normal temperatures with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. So you have to experiment around with that a little bit, and I've tweaked support settings and so forth and tried different things to try to make it easier to remove it. But when you're laying down a bead of 230 degree filament out of a 0.8 millimeter nozzle on top of some support filament, it's going to stick. And I found it a little bit harder to get it just to pop off. Well, I think I've talked about enough. I'm probably about to use up the memory in this little camera. I'm still using my XTU camera since my DJI Osmos camera lost the main screen, went out on it, so I don't have any way to view anything or even change settings on it. I don't know what happened to that screen, but anyway, we've got this one going, and we'll try to get used to it and see how it works. So until the next time, happy printing from New Tech Inventors.